Welcome back to Raised by Giants Illuminated Insights discussion. We are live. Welcome everyone in the chat, members and moderators out there. Good to see you guys. We have an amazing show for you here today that I've really been looking forward to. A follow up to my discussion with Jerry Marzinsky about his book, A Journey into the Psychotic Mind, Breaking the Spell of the Ivory Tower, which was an amazing discussion. If you haven't listened to that episode yet, please do. And I highly recommend his book as well. I've read it so many times that it's all nice and beat up and torn up here. So a warm welcome back to the show, author with a BA in psychology from Temple University, a master's degree in counseling from the University of Georgia, 2 years in a PhD psychology program, retired licensed psychotherapist who's worked over 35 years with schizophrenic and psychiatric patients in state hospitals, state prisons, and hospital emergency rooms. Jerry Marzinsky, welcome back to the show. How are you doing?
Great. Glad to be back with you.
I am too. And we also have Lynn here with us as well. But I think it's important, really quick here, Jerry, to give a recap of our last show to clear up things as well, because it seems to be a few people are confused as to exactly what we were talking about. And but people seem to think that the voices that people hear, the paranoid schizophrenics hear, aren't their thoughts, that paranoid schizophrenics hear different voices that aren't their own. And we talked about this last time, and I thought you were pretty clear with your description of what was going on. But if you could reiterate that for me and for the audience as well, I think that would be great.
Yeah, there is a split there. Those thoughts are not their own, but they sound like they are. Okay. So any negative thought about yourself or anybody else does not come from you. Okay. They don't teach you that, where thoughts come from. Nobody talks about where thoughts come from except Manuel Swedenborg. I mean, he knew 300 years ago. Psychiatry has no idea where thoughts come from. They say the brain. The brain is just like a radio receiver. It will receive the frequency of the thought that it's set to. So, if you're set at a low frequency, it'll pull in low frequency thoughts, which is what's happened with schizophrenics. They're stuck at a very low frequency. And if you try to force that frequency up, the voices will turn it back down again. They don't want the frequency increasing because they need that low frequency. They need that turmoil. They need that paranoia. They need that fear to feed off of that energy. So they feed off a very low frequency energy. They can't stand high frequency energy. Okay, so one of the rules that Sherry Sweeney came up with, and she heard voices when she was a young gal that almost killed her, is any negative thought about yourself or anybody else does not come from you. Manuel Swedenborg, the Christian mystic, says none of your thoughts belong to you. They either come in from the positive side, from the heavenly side, or they come in from the hellish side. You're the one that chooses which ones you want to attend to and follow. And if you follow the negative ones, you start moving down a negative path. You follow the positive ones, you'll move in a positive path. The Native Americans said you have two wolves on your shoulders, and the one you feed the most is the direction you're going to move, or it's going to be the one that gets the strongest. But for the most part, the voices, they're not you. They don't come from you, but they sound like your thoughts. Okay. So what these things do is they slip in these negative thoughts into your thought stream. They want you to believe that they're you. If you believe that they're you, you become them.
So they're basically 100% indistinguishable to your own thoughts that you have almost every day.
No, they're not 100% indistinguishable. Like I said, every negative thought about yourself or somebody else comes from them. Their intent is very different from your own intent. But as far as voice tone, and they don't come across like, we're the voices. Like you said, for the most part. I mean, they seldom do that. For the most part, they sound just like the thousands of thoughts that run through your mind on an average day, except the content is very different. The intent is very different. They want you to do stuff that you normally don't want to do, or that you know or you feel is bad. They're negative. They want to get you upset. They want to get you fearful and annoyed. They're anti-religious. They want you generating negative emotion, and that's what they feed off of.
Now, what about somebody with multiple personality disorder? Now, I know that multiple personality disorder isn't called that anymore. It's called DID, dissociative identity disorder. Now, would they be experiencing different kinds of voices?
Yeah, but that's very different. I mean, that's actually a separate personality takes over at different times. And it may have a different voice. So maybe the original person is, you know, they're allergic to shrimp, but when they switch over to that other personality, a totally different personality, that personality can eat shrimp with not a problem, uh, without any reaction. So it's almost like a different personality kind of comes in and takes over. The voices, there's usually a battle. They don't get to take over all of a sudden like they do with the multiple personality disorders, where the person just switches like a light switch from one personality to the other. There's usually a battle. The victim realizes that something is trying to control them. That they understand that this thing is telling them bad things, that they're saying bad things about them. So there's three things that happen. They have to figure out what these things are, because there's no doubt they experience them. You know, they're hearing voices that they don't know what they are. They suspect they're not them. If they believe what the psychiatric mafia tells them, that they are hallucinations, and that the only thing that can be done for them is to take these toxic drugs, that's the worst of the three choices, right? Because those drugs that they use to calm these voices, that's all they do. They just don't dumb them down, and they dumb them down at the expense of the person, of the victim. You know, so they're lethargic, their eyes are blurred, there's sexual dysfunction, there's all kinds of nasty side effects to those drugs, but they don't cure anything. 99% of the time, they don't get rid of the voices. All they do is damp them down. So they're treating the symptoms. They're not treating the cause. They have no idea what the cause is. Now, they'll tell you that it's a biochemical imbalance of the brain. That was made up by Eli Lilly when they came out with Prozac. It's a complete fabrication. They had no evidence for it whatsoever. Okay? They want you to believe that so they can sell you their toxic drugs. They want you to believe that the only treatment for schizophrenia is their drugs. Now, there's Ronald W. Pies, professor of psychiatry. He said, I don't believe I have ever heard a knowledgeable, well-trained psychiatrist make such a preposterous claim as these patients have a chemical imbalance, except perhaps to mock it. In truth, the chemical imbalance notion was always a kind of urban legend, never a theory seriously propounded by well-informed psychiatrists. And I have these same things over and over again, psychiatrists speaking up to the fact that there is no chemical imbalance. It's a bullcrap made up by big pharma to sell drugs, and they're teaching it in the universities. So big pharma is so powerful that they have bought off the Congress, they bought off the universities, and the universities are teaching this chemical imbalance garbage right now. So you have thousands of psychiatrists graduating every year, believing that the schizophrenia is caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain. Now, anybody who thinks that true and works around psychiatrists, you watch what they do before they prescribe these drugs. You would think that if it was a chemical imbalance, they would want some kind of baseline. They would give some kind of lab test or EKG or EEG or some kind of test to determine what was out of balance by how much. You won't see that happen. They don't have any such test. It doesn't exist. They don't have any way to test this chemical imbalance thing. They don't even know what the chemical balance of the brain should be. It's all a fabrication. It's all a big lie to sell you these toxic psychiatric drugs that actually rot out the brains of schizophrenics and anybody else who takes them. With long-term use, your brain shrinks like a walnut. They found that with autopsies. You know, so when they were doing autopsies on long-term psychiatric patients, they look at their brains and they were shrunk like a walnut. Of course, the psychiatric mafia and big pharma didn't like that at all. So they go, "Oh, it's not our drugs, it's the schizophrenia. Yeah, schizophrenia is doing it. They have no idea what schizophrenia is. Yeah, but whatever it is, it's shrinking their brains. But more honest researchers started feeding these antipsychotic drugs to monkeys, mice, and rats, and their brains shrunk also. Now they won't tell you this when you start taking these drugs. I've never seen them tell their patient how dangerous these drugs are. These are some of the most dangerous drugs in use in medicine today. They are toxic. And those side effects are toxic side effects from these drugs. They don't cure anything. All they do is treat the symptoms. They don't want to cure. All they want to do is sell drugs. Now, if they wanted a cure, they wouldn't have reduced the research funds for schizophrenia down to a dribble. They lied about the number of schizophrenics that are in the United States. They chose and cherry-picked certain statistics to make it look like it wasn't as big a problem as it actually is. But the amount of money that they're spending on schizophrenia research is virtually nothing. They don't make any money doing curing people. They
Right.
make their money by endlessly treating them.
Yeah, that is very apparent. Now, I know that you have some transcripts that you want to read before we bring Lynn on, and I'm very excited to speak with Lynn, because she can like see the entities. Um, and I want you to read those to give a really good example of what these voices are and how these voices interact with the patients before we bring Lynn on to share her experiences.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is read you some of the just a couple of the um, kind of transcripts that I have to kind of give you a taste of what these things are. They're not hallucinations are random. They're all over the place. There's no pattern to them. These things run specific patterns, and they're repeatable patterns, and they run them from one side of the U.S. to the other. And now that I'm working with the Mace Energy System, they're all over the world. These same patterns. Okay. And if you want to see those patterns, you can go to my website at jerrymarzinsky.com. They're under the articles section. Anybody who's working with schizophrenics or has a family member who's schizophrenic will see these patterns for themselves. They're not hidden in biochemistry or genetics. I mean, they're right out there up front for you to see for yourself. Okay. So I had one schizophrenic write me, and he says, the voices say, if you poop, someone will die. If you poop, then the person you care for will have to eat it. Usually it's the person you care for. In my experience, the people that will suffer as per voices are religious mystics. Okay, so you look how they put the person in a double bind here. You at some point you got to poop, but they got them convinced that if they do, their family's going to die or somebody else is going to be in trouble. Okay, so that's the kind of bind that they put these people in, and of course they're suffering. If they believe what the voices say, they're in serious trouble. So if they believe what the voices say, they're going to eventually become the voices, right? So they got three choices. They either believe what the psychiatric mafia is saying, that they're hallucinations, take their toxic drugs, and nothing will be cured. The second group will go, well, I don't know what they are. Okay, they stand half a chance. The ones who have the best chance of recovery are the ones that say they aren't me. These things are separate from me. They're evil things. They're separate from me. I don't like them. Okay, so here's a transcript of one fella. Now, what this guy did is the voices. He was psychotic at the time. The voices told him that there was a marijuana field up in Oregon. And they said, get your money, get bags of burlap bags and get a machete and we'll show you where they are. Okay. So he followed the voices all the way from San Diego up to California, up to a mountain range. And the voices are guiding him every step of the way up to this marijuana sesame marijuana crop up on the top of one of these mountains. They showed him the hiking trail. He cut it down. He took 3 burlap sacks, brought it back to his car. They showed him where to sell it. He was selling it in a national park. They told him which people would buy it, and he bought all the prostitutes he could handle. He bought all the alcohol he could handle. He bought all the drugs. He was using cocaine that he could handle, and the voices were fishermen. They wanted to go fishing, so he went out with them fishing, and the voices told him where to cast his rod, how long to stay there, and where to throw his hook, what kind of bait to use. He was the only one on the Columbia River catching fish that day. Okay? So this is when I was investigating his story. So I'm going to kind of read you the entire transcript so you get a feel for it. So here I'm talking to him in a counseling session. I said, I remember you telling me that these things knew stuff you didn't. The patient said, yeah, they would tell me where to fish, what bait to use, irrespective of what everybody else was using. I would follow their advice and would catch fish when nobody else was catching them, tons of them. I asked him, did you have any similar experience with regard to the voices telling you supernatural things? He said, yes. They would go home with my girlfriend and tell me everything she was doing that night. The strongest voice told me one night, I'm going home with her. In the morning, he came back and told me that she dyed her hair. He also told me she was masturbating and had sex toys in her dresser. I said, did you check that out with her later? He said, yes, I asked her and she admitted it. I said, how did you go about asking her such a thing? He said, I just asked her. He said, I asked her, do you have any toys you play with? She said, what do you mean? He said, toys that you play with, ones you keep next to your bed. She was real shy, but admitted she did. Did she wonder how you knew that? No, she didn't say anything else. I said, I remember when you were telling me about the voices telling you where to find the marijuana fields in Oregon. The time you followed their instructions and drove all the way from San Diego to Oregon to find the pot fields they were telling you about. He said, yeah. I said, did they also tell you where to sell the marijuana you cut from those fields? He said, yes, they told me to go sell it in a national park around lakes and rivers. They told me exactly which people to approach. I asked him, were there any people you were told to approach that you might have thought wouldn't smoke pot, like old people? He said, no, I did good selling the pot. I made it up to Oregon with barely enough money to pay for gas and returned with $400. I said, I remember you telling me that when the voices got very strong, they hang out of your body. What do you mean by that? Can you elaborate? He said, yeah, they stick out of my body, kind of like part of them is out looking around. When they leave totally, I can feel them gone. They aren't talking, they're just there. When they fade out to the inside, I can feel them there. It was like they were there in the same house, but they closed the door. When they left my body and went outside, they were totally gone. I asked him, where did they go? He said, one time the strongest one went to the mall. He said, I'd been searching for a certain type of fancy blue jean. I couldn't find them anywhere. The strongest one volunteered to go out and find them for me. I asked him, how long were they gone? He said, hours. Did you get the feeling that they walk like we do, or did they fly? He said, they fly. And the strongest one came back in a few hours and told you exactly where the special pair of blue jeans you wanted were? He said, yeah, he came back and told me about the place. When I went there, the salesman told me that they didn't have them in stock, but they could order them. I asked him, I've had several other patients who told me that the voices they heard did not like them having girlfriends. Were the relationships you got into with females threatening to them? He said, sometimes yes and sometimes no. He said, the girlfriends I wanted to spend the most time with were the ones who the voices found most threatening. They just wanted to drug, steal, and drink. So the woman you were trying to form a real relationship with, you were the ones that threatened the voices the most. He said, yeah, I had a girlfriend once who heard voices also. I could tell she was hearing voices before I met her. Were you attracted to that? He said, yes and no. She told me that if I kissed another girl, she would kill me. She always knew where to find me and always knew what I was doing. She had ESP. She knew my excuses before I could even formulate them. I said, how long did that relationship last? 3 years. Her knowing everything was spooky. How did your voices get along with the ones she was hearing? They didn't talk to one another. That was common. The voices in one person don't talk to the voices in another person. And I
Mm.
asked him, were your voices aware of the existence of your girlfriend's voices? He said, yes, but they didn't talk. The voices in both of us ignored each other. Did they battle with each other for control? He said, no. She knew shit about me and I knew shit about her. Stuff nobody else knew? He said, yes.
Mm.
Did you guys fight a lot? Did you surprise each other with what you knew about each other? He said, you mean like, did this slimy, did this slimy thing 10 years ago? Or like, you mean like, did you do this slimy thing 10 years ago? He said, no, it was more like I knew for certain that she was lying when she was lying, no matter how insistent she was that she wasn't lying. I knew that she had cheated on old boyfriends. I knew she wanted to get married. I knew one day she was going to move off to Oregon. One day she did just that. I asked him, did she tell you she was leaving? He said, she wanted me to go with her. I told her I wasn't ready. I asked him, so her voices knew what you were doing, what she might not like, and vice versa. Yours knew what she was doing and behind your back. Her voices would tell her who I was with, what I was doing, and what the girl was, what girl I was with, what they looked like when I cheated on her. And I asked him, what did she do when her voices reported to you that you had other relationships with females? He said she threw a fit. She had a terrible temper. Did you ever admit to her you would be, that you were seeing other women behind her back? He said she told me I didn't have to. She knew it already. One night she even knew the name of the girl I was cheating with. Did you guys ever beat up on one another? He said, yeah, she hit me once. She liked to be spanked. Brenda was her name. She was beautiful. We would walk into a place and all the guys would turn their heads. How old was she at that time? 21. She would hang out in the bars. What did you guys talk about most of the time? He said, I don't know, whatever came up. Who cheated on who the most? He said, I did. What effect did that have? Nothing drastic as long as I gave her preference and did not skip on sex with her. What were the voices doing when you were having sex? He said they enjoyed it. They knew exactly what the woman wanted, where they wanted to be touched, when and for how long, and what to do next. The thing I asked him, you think the same thing was going on with your girlfriend? He said, yeah. And the voices you were hearing and her voices never spoke to one another. No, but her voices were very strong. You weren't afraid of her voices? He said, no, but I respected them. What is the strangest thing that happened between you two? He said, just knowing when the other one was cheating. Did you ever try to interfere when you knew she was cheating? He said, no. Could you have? He said, no, I didn't care. I had so many other women. I didn't care if she had sex with other men. I said, it's amazing you didn't come up with some kind of sexually transmitted disease. Did the voices tell you which of your partners were clean or not? He said, yes, they sure did. I never got a disease. I was with hundreds of women. I got the crabs one time. We both felt the voices were our guardian angels. We were both sure of it at the time. Yes, so they would tell you they would do all these supernatural things for you to impress you and make you think they were guardian angels as they slowly walked you into a living hell. He said, absolutely. Okay. I said,
It really sounds like these demons and these entities just want to get high and have sex with people, Jerry.
yep. They wanted to create negative emotional environments. They, uh, that's exactly it. And what they're doing, even though he loved having all that money, all the drugs, all the women, he was slowly sinking. His health was going downhill. He ended up in prison for a long period of time. So even though it's great for a while, it's not in the long run. What they're doing is bringing them down.
Imagine if these voices were good, like what people could really accomplish. And I want to bring Lynn on here really quickly because she's been waiting very patiently in the background here. And but imagine if we could just if the voices were actually good voices and they wanted to better your life and increase your spirituality, what people could accomplish. I mean, that would
Well,
be amazing, right? Why do they
well,
always have to be negative?
well, the voices that barge into your head are the negative ones. The positive ones speak in feeling and intuition, or serendipity. So it's like you get an intuition, you get an inner feeling that I shouldn't be doing this, or I shouldn't do that, or I shouldn't make this decision. So you're being spoken to by the positive ones all the time, but they're not allowed to barge in and take over like the negative ones do. They have to have permission. So you have to ask them to come and then listen for them very carefully. They will not barge in and take over. They're respectful. They're not allowed to, for one. So this is from the outside. This is, looking from the outside and from a therapist perspective. This is how the voices react. So you had an inside look. Now Lynn can see them from the outside too. So both of us are telling you guys that these things are not hallucinations. Did that sound like a hallucination to you? They were complete sentences. They made sense. They were what was driving this guy. They weren't random word cabbage like a hallucination would be. So
Right.
Lynn saw them from the outside. So
right, and joining us is world-renowned author of the 5-star Omnipresent series and the book Callers of Heaven, Beginnings Never End. She's an empath with the ability to see frequencies most cannot, with the ability to view the transitioning soul from the physical realm into the spirit upon death. She has been a nurse for over 30 years and works with end-of-life care patients. She also holds a degree in biological science. Here to share her experiences with us, Lynn Monet. Welcome back to the show. It's good to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, gosh. Thank you so much for having me. Jerry, thank you for inviting me as well. It's great to be here.
Yeah. How did you guys meet? How did you meet Jerry?
I am a fan of Jerry's. I started hearing about his work and I thought, I've got to reach out to this guy because so much of what he was talking about, I could understand from a different perspective. So I reached out to him actually, and that's how we connected.
Yeah, that's incredible. And from my understanding, you worked at in an internship at a psychiatric hospital. What did you experience while working there?
I did. I went back actually later in life to further my degree as a nurse, and I had to do rotation in my psychiatric class in the psychiatric ward, and we were placed in there for a week, and multiple things occurred. And as I was listening to Jerry talking about reading off his client interview, for lack of a better word, a lot of that started to bring up some other things that I remember too. But I've always had a gift of seeing spirits. I have the gift of second sight ever since I was little. So when I went into this setting with the classroom, and Jerry's heard the story a couple of times, the thing that really, really hit home for me, again, I had never had the experience in a psychiatric setting. I'd always been in end-of-life care or med surg or something like that. Urology was another specialty that I had. Being in the end-of-life care, I would see people that would be considered hallucinating as they were getting closer to their time of death, which was not hallucinations. And you were mentioning about the good and the bad. And these people would hear good things. They'd see their parents, they'd see their loved ones, they'd talk about seeing them, and they'd be medicated the same way for hallucinations. So seeing it from a different perspective, as there is a light side, we're talking about paranormal as a blanketed topic, there is a white side and a darker side to that. So being placed into the situation in one of the psychiatric hospitals that I was placed in, it was the very first day. We walked in, there were a group of 8 nurses with a teacher, and the teacher had left all of us student nurses standing there while she went in to get our assignments. And there was a young woman that was there, looked to be in her early 20s, kind of chunky, real short hair. She had on like a spaghetti straps with her midriff showing and short shorts on. And she walked over to the group and she pointed at me and she said, "You can help me. I know you can." And of course, I'm in that moment wanting to be Lynn, the student nurse, not Lynn, the weirdo. So I'm like, "Oh, please don't let her be talking to me." And, I'm like, "Oh my gosh." So I just kept my mouth shut. And fortunately, the teacher came through and she ushered us out. She said, "Don't make eye contact. Don't talk to anybody." And just to back up a little bit, this particular area was the intake area. So we actually had to sign papers that if we got hit with something or bitten or something happened to us while we were in there, somebody assaulted us, that we couldn't hold the facility responsible.
Was this a state-run psychiatric ward?
It was, yes, as a matter of fact, this one was. There were a couple of, and a lot of them are state run. There are very few. They don't allow the student nurses really to come into the private ones. So, you kind of go into the state run ones. But
So I want to bring that up and
Okay.
emphasize, because I've worked in a number of psychiatric facilities and they all do pretty much the same thing. They will not allow people in there to see what's going on. Researchers are not allowed in there. People who are interested in psychiatry are not allowed in. And then they make it look like it's the most dangerous place on earth.
Yeah.
That's
by
true.
far, it's not. I mean, for the most part, those people aren't going to hurt you. I mean,
And they don't want the patients to leave either. That's
No.
the other. They're not interested in getting the patients better. Definitely not in
No,
state-ran psych wards, right? And some
Nope,
people never leave. If you don't have family and you're locked up in a mental institution, you can bet you're never going to leave. It's really sad.
In the private ones, they're going to run out your insurance until it's depleted. Insurance won't pay anymore. Then they're going to let you out of there.
Right,
Yeah,
unless they can soak up Medicaid. If they can attach them with that, then they'll just keep that train going.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. State-run
nobody's-
insurance at a state-run facility.
Yes.
So they're basically just drugging people silly and controlling them. Nobody's recovering.
No.
They're just they leave with medications to drug themselves more.
And I'm also convinced that mental institutions are also creating the problem, right? Because if you lock a sane person up in a mental institution, they will inevitably become mentally ill, or what we perceive to be mentally ill.
Well, but they would not necessarily. Matter of fact, I have a fellow who spent 8 months while he was sane in a state mental hospital in San Antonio. Now I can bring him on too, and he can tell you about the experiences, what he experienced there as a sane person. When he first entered, he wasn't, but he snapped out of it. But yeah, they just drug people silly. They just line them up and they just drug them, so they don't have to deal with them.
I'm sorry. And
Go
a
ahead.
lot of people too, they're empaths, but it's not something that is socially acceptable. And that's why I kept my mouth shut, because I didn't want to be admitted, "Oh, gee, I see dead people." I mean, you can't just walk around and say that. And so what Sherry's saying is very, very true. Yeah, you've got to be careful. At this day and age, a lot of people are empaths and they have never had that supported. And in a lot of people's lives, traditional religion plays a part in kind of squelching that. Everybody's born with gifts. They just either have the opportunity to have them supported and they flourish, or they're dubbed out. And I would say 90% of people in this world aren't connected in with that ability. And when you get one that is, they become afraid of it, and they end up putting them into places like that. So which is the case of also the young girl that had approached me and said, "You can help me. I know you can."
And what happened? Well, yeah, definitely. The history of mental institutions and mental asylums in the United States are crazy ridiculous, and Jerry maps that all out in his book. It used to be that you could just go and drop your kid off at a mental institution. You could drop your wife off. A husband that wants to get rid of his wife, they can be like, "Oh, she's crazy, she's not well," and then they would just lock her up.
That's
Just
true.
get rid of her like that.
they actually had a section on the fourth day that I was there. I was taken to a section where the people, one of the nurses said that these are people that the families don't even bother come to visit anymore because, you know, they're basically crazy. And in this setting, there was a woman that was sitting at a round table with 4 chairs, and she was having this conversation. I mean, they were ghosts. They were spirits in the chairs. And so she's the only embodied person sitting at this table, and she's having this conversation between all 3 of these spirits and herself. And the thing was, is it was like she was on a telephone, and you could hear her conversation making sense, but you couldn't hear the response of the other person, but you could kind of get the gist of what they were saying by the way that she responded.
See, and that flies in the face of the psychiatric mafia, who's saying these things are hallucinations. Hallucinations are random. They're all over the place. It's like word salad. No, they're carrying on coherent, well-organized conversations with these entities, and these entities are speaking back to them. They are not hallucinations.
That's very, very true. And the thing about it is that the nurse was saying, oh, that's so-and-so. She's talking to people that aren't there again. And I'm looking at the table and I'm like, oh, no, she's not. She's got 3 people sitting with her. She's having a full conversation with 3 people that are, in fact, sitting there. You just can't see them, but she can.
And you couldn't open your mouth.
But I couldn't. No, I couldn't open my mouth. Like I said, I didn't want to be admitted, you know. Let's leave that one there. But if you'd like me to tell you the story about the girl that approached me, I'll be happy to do that.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. We have all the time in the world, so you can speak about whatever you want to speak about. Yes. Tell us about the entity that was attached to the girl. Yes.
Okay, and as a matter of fact, one thing that I did notice walking around is that there were people there with schizophrenia. There were people there with addiction issues, and the attachments are different. So the young lady, of course, we were ushered out of the room, and then I got placed back in that area, the intake area, along with one other nurse. And we were sitting there. They had picnic tables that were bolted to the floor. And we were sitting at the picnic tables doing our charting because we had our patient assignment. And our patients, they have these periods of time where they'll go into, not like classes, but they all sit together as a group. And then there are other times that they'll meet with their social worker or the psychiatrist to talk to as well. But they constantly usually have something going on that they have to go to. So in my patient at that time had gone to theirs. Mine was somebody that had attempted suicide, so it was a little bit different. But this young lady came over and she sat down with us, and she was sitting I was sitting with my legs in the chair facing the table, and she sat down with her back to the table, so her legs were off, coming off of the side, and she's covered in these marks. She's got claw marks all over her. The claw marks look like cat scratches. They're thin, just like that. And the thing is that she had kind of started to tell me the story, and the other nurse the story about how she had been molested by their minister from the age 10 to like age 14. And then her mother got remarried, and then her stepfather started raping her until she was 16. And it was this trauma. And she ended up running away. She ended up doing devil worship. And then she realized that wasn't for her. And she started hearing 25 different voices. She referenced that there was one. And the thing about the voices, a lot of them can be disembodied souls that have not crossed over, because we do have a choice to cross over or not at the time of death. But they're always controlled by something darker. And she had made mention that one of them had a very long fingernail and was scratching her on the inside of her female parts, and that the facility was saying that they were self-inflicted. Prior to that, I had purchased a home in East Flat Rock, North Carolina. As a single mother with 2 kids, and it was haunted so bad, I never moved in. Unbeknownst to me, it was haunted. I didn't know it when I purchased it. I found out. I've got teams of witnesses and groups of people that I had come through there that either saw and or were touched or affected adversely by the spirits in that house. But at one point, I was in that house. And I'm mentioning this to say, to have people understand how I identified the claw marks on this woman. Is in the kitchen. I was standing with my best friend. She's holding something in each hand we see this ectoplasm wall coming at us, and all of a sudden she starts screaming, and she ends up with a claw mark on her back between her shoulder blades, underneath her bra strap on her back, and also one on her stomach. That was caused by a demon that was coming into the room with that ectoplasmic portal. So I recognize the claw marks being the same as the ones that I saw happen on my best friend while I stood next to her in that kitchen. So I'm thinking, oh my God, this poor woman, she's covered in claw marks. I could see it on her legs, and she had them in places that there is just no way that she could have done them at that angle to herself. There's just, she would have had to have been a contortionist. I mean, there's just no way to have reached at that angle to create those claw marks on her. And she was then called away. It was time for her appointment with her social worker or her psychiatrist or somebody. And she got up and she started to walk away. And as she got probably like 15 or 20 feet away, I'm looking, not even 20, probably more like 15 feet away, I'm noticing that she has these clustered grape-looking type things over each shoulder, like she had a clear, like a clear single-size pillowcase, but yet they weren't encased, but they were all kind of clustered together like that, like Santa Claus bags almost. And I'm like, oh my God, she really is hearing 25 voices. She's got attachments on her back. And after she had returned,
now you're seeing this in the spiritual
Yes.
sense, in the spiritual realm, correct?
yes,
Lynn,
as a matter,
do you have the drawing?
you know what? I do. But I think, I'm sorry, it got moved. Let me look for it in just a few minutes for you.
Okay.
I meant to sit it here, and my daughter's birthday, it might have accidentally gotten moved. But what it looks like is they're about the size of potatoes. Some of the faces are inverted, so the mouth is on the top and the eyes are on the bottom. Some are sideways, some are upright like normal. And I say potatoes misshapen because, of course, they have no bones. So they were all kind of clustered together like grapes on her back, and they were attached to her shoulders with this horn, like hollow-looking horn type thing that came in at the top of her shoulders and then clipped underneath her armpit. It didn't go all the way around. It was just at the top. So there was a little bit of a gap, and it was kind of a brownish tan color, kind of twisted like a horn. And that seemed to be what was clustering them together. So that's why I say they looked like they were clustered like grapes. When she returned from her appointment with her doctor, she went to her room, and I went to her down the hallway. She was just 3 doors down from my patient anyway. So I went and I knocked on her door frame, and she invited me in, and I said to her, I said, look, I said, if you repeat what I'm about ready to tell you, they're going to think that you're crazier, and they're going to keep you in here longer. So what I'm telling you, you need to not mention to anybody, but I believe that you are in fact hearing 25 different voices because you've got attachments on your back. And she's in that moment, I had been having some personal things going on in my life, and there is a preparation that goes with it before you just go taking attachments off of people, because you don't want them to attach to you and you bring them home. So you have to do certain things to protect yourself, and of course be in a space where you're not under a lot of stress, or even tired for that matter. You need to be fully alert and oriented and on par, like at 100%. So as she turned from me, something just overcame me, because I wasn't going to do it. And I just reached my hand up underneath those horn things, and I picked them up off of her, and they came off very, very easily. And she immediately turned at me because they were starting to fall to the ground. I'm trying to stomp them into the ground. Some of them have rolled away. And she turns to me and she says, it felt like you were pulling grass off my back. So she didn't know that I was taking them off of her back. I didn't tell her. I didn't ask her permission. I just, went ahead and did that. And she did feel it. She said that, like I said, it felt like hair coming off of her back. And I told her in that moment, I said, look, this is a temporary fix. I said, some of them have rolled away over by your bed. They can reattach to you, but I've gotten the bulk of them off. When you get out of here, you need to go and find someone that removes these things from you. I said, you find a Catholic priest, find someone that, find somebody in the Latin religions that do this kind of thing and have them, remove this from you. So
I don't know about a Catholic priest there, Lynn. That's a
Well-
little stretch, but I do 100% believe in energy healing. I've had it done on myself,
Mhm.
and for someone that really knows what they're doing and they're legitimate, out of all the fraud people that are out there claiming that they can cleanse your body and cleanse your aurora and take off attachments and all that,
yes,
there's probably one out of 1,000 that can actually really do it. But those people that can really do it are 100% legit, and it really
Right.
does work.
Well, and the reason why I told her at that time Catholic priest was because this was my first experience with them. Since then, of course, I wouldn't say that, but at that time, that is what I had made mention to her, because I was trying to find a way to get her help and to give her some resources. I did run into her about a year later in the Walmart. I was in the candle section squatting down. I see these two women at the end of the aisle and they're talking to each other, looking at me. And I'm like, I'm checking for toilet paper on my shoe if my zipper's down. I thought, maybe something. And I stood up and I hear one of them saying to the other, "No, I know that's her." And I thought, oh, it's a fan. Maybe it's somebody that read my book, And so she comes over and she says, "Do you remember me?" And she looked so different. I mean, when she was in the facility, her skin was almost an ashen color because she was being so drained by these things that were sucking her life from her, and they were feeding on her energy. And she looked very pink. She had a cute little blonde bob, looked completely different, had lost weight. And I'm looking at her and I'm like, you're familiar, but I'm sorry, I can't place you. And she said, "You're the nurse. You're the nurse that helped me." And I said to her, and I all of a sudden in that moment, I'm like, oh my God, and she's telling me that she went and she got help from someone. She said that she was now on a low dose of some anti-anxiety medication, and she was in her second year of becoming a dental hygienist. So her life completely turned around. Unfortunately, she didn't tell anybody what I had told her, but I have to say this. I found out that the following year, for some reason, the facility wasn't allowing that particular school back in there again. I don't know why, but anyway, but I started walking around the facility because we were there for a whole week, and we were in different areas of the facility, and I started looking at people, noticing the ones that had attachments that looked like hers, and ones that had these backpack looking things on them. And I asked my other nursing friends, I said, "Hey, by chance does your client have schizophrenia?" And they're like, yeah, how did you know? And I'm like, oh, I just wondered. And out of all of them, I only got one time wrong, and it was because it was a person that had a combination of addiction and the diagnosis of schizophrenia. But yeah.
Yeah, and I
So-
really want to get into that as well, the addiction aspect of this. But really quickly, can you, whenever you see these entities and you can see these frequencies that are emanating off of these people that have paranoid schizophrenia, is that something that you can turn on and off, or do you see it just 100% by accident, or how does that work with you?
I can, that particular thing I can turn on and off. I mean, sometimes I'm walking through the grocery store and I'm walking past and I kind of see this tentacle thing peeking out from one of a person, maybe with an addiction, that has like a spider looking archon on it, and I'm like, oof, don't want that to attach to me, because sometimes they will reach out and attach onto you just innocently in a grocery store. I mean, it's so important for people to keep up with their energetic fields and keep it clear and clean and keep it solid, because if you get a crack in the windshield, you're a candidate to be bringing something home with you that belongs to somebody else.
Now, the addiction aspect of this, because this is what I've seen a lot, and I worked in a mental health facility for around a year, and it wasn't a lockdown psych ward; it was like a voluntary program.
Mhm.
But what I experienced was a lot of psychosis, more specifically drug psychosis, due to meth. And mostly what I was dealing with was borderline personality disorder, bipolar disorder, and DID. But the patients would see things. They never spoke about hearing things. They'd always see things. Like I had a patient once pacing back and forth, telling me that there was a man in a hoodie in the backyard with a gun that was going to kill him, and that he could see him. And he was trying to convince me that he was there. And to me, which I don't have a degree in psychology and I'm not a psychotherapist, but it indeed seemed like a straight up hallucination due to drug psychosis. I mean, the behavior of these patients were very erratic behavior. And then he switched it up to that the neighbor was going to kill him and that the neighbor was spying on him, because when he'd walk around the backyard, a certain section would trigger the neighbor's backyard light. Right. And this guy had never been here before. He was like from North Carolina or something. And the place that I worked at was in California. And he made it about the neighbors trying to kill him. And then he also said that the government was also trying to kill him, and that he would the government was listening to him through other people's phones. So if you were anywhere around him and you had your phone out in his visible line of view, he would just freak out. And these were young people too, not older people. This gentleman I'm speaking about was around 30 years old. So how do we differentiate between a drug, psychosis, schizophrenia, and the entities? Because they all seem very similar.
They do seem similar. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, they are. The meth addicts, what they see to start with is they call them the shadow people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they're three-dimensional dark shadows that are darker than the rest of the room. If they see their eyes, the eyes are either lime green or red.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? They're demonic entities. They never physically hurt anybody, but they scare the bejesus out of them. They can walk through walls. These people wake up and these things are standing at the foot of their bed or watching them or looking at them. But what you're talking about, meth is one of the most dangerous drugs out there. I've seen scores of prisoners who were using meth, and they started having hallucinations, just like as schizophrenia. You know, here's voices talking to them, telling them rotten things about themselves, attacking them. And then when they come down, those voices disappear. So they're going, oh, that was just a hallucination. Now that may happen, 10, 20 times for another several weeks or months. And then one day, those voices don't go away. And they're just as psychotic as anybody in the state hospital. They're done.
So it's like opening up a doorway, opening up
exactly
a portal into their mind.
Opens up the portal and says, come on in and get me.
It does.
There is no difference between a paranoid schizophrenic and a meth addict who has started hearing voices. It's the same phenomenon.
Right. And a lot of times too, because we are on the third dimension and the other side is on the fifth, there is that fourth dimensional realm. And when somebody is taking mental altering medications or drugs that are altering their mental status, it can put them into that fourth where they are seeing things such as a man with a gun, because their body is closer to death than, how can I explain this? It's not that they're dying, but they are in a state of more closer to death because of the medication that they're toying with versus solidly alive, if that makes sense. And that puts them in that altered thought pattern that they are seeing things. And like Jerry said too about the shadow people, the shadows are man-made. They are created by the negativity that's caused by the addiction that the other spirits are feeding off of. That way they show up as men with hats, they show up as snakes, and they show up as these ovoid fluttering things that go across the floor, and they get larger and larger as the negativity that is exhibited from the person's addiction and the people around them that are suffering also because of the rippling effect of the addiction that the person has, that they create these things. And that's why they then also see those things when they are not on the medication.
Well, and also sleep deprivation, because that's what
Yes.
meth normally does. Is it creates a sleep deprivation. If you're up for a really long period of time, you start to see things that aren't really there, which, I mean, people do hallucinate, right? But figuring out what's a hallucination, what's real is a different story. And also figuring out what's real, what's a hallucination, and what's a drug psychosis. I'd imagine is also very difficult as well. See, my personal belief, and this isn't backed up by anything because I'm not a doctor, but it seems to me that drugs are responsible for a lot of this when it used to be just plain old trauma. And now you have heavy drugs mixed in with trauma, which is not a good mixture at all.
No,
Right.
it's not.
Now, I did have in the prison, I had one patient who actually experimented to try to find out what the shadow people were. So he was a long-term meth injection addict. And he told me that he did this experiment one day, and I was all ears. Okay, tell me about it. So what he did with a friend of his, both of them were meth users. They wanted to see if they both saw the same shadow person or not. So they brought their needles, their meth. They went out to an Indian reservation south of here in the middle of nowhere at night down a dirt road. And one of them injected, and he started seeing the shadow people. So he would ask the other one, "You see that one over there by the tree?" The other one said, "No, I don't see him." So he's pointing them out as they appear to him, and the other guy couldn't see any of them. So when the other guy injected, he started pointing them out to the first guy, and the first guy goes, "Yeah, I can see him." And they're asking each other, "You see the one over there?" "Oh yeah, I see him. What's he doing?" "Well, he's doing this." They came to the conclusion that they were both seeing the same ones. So here's two people seeing the same phenomena over and over and over again. Now, one thing they did is, and I've heard this from numerous, if they see that you can see them, they start closing in on the person who they know can see them. I've never talked to anybody who stayed there long enough to tell me what they did once they got there. Everybody took off. So what these guys were doing is standing out there in the desert by the truck, and these things started moving in on them from all over the desert. And then when they saw that, they freaked out. They jumped in the truck, closed the door, and locked it. And they were still watching them from inside the truck. Then this fellow said that the back of the truck went down like a 1,000-pound boulder hit the back of the truck, and the front jumped up. And I was going, boy, that's weird. I didn't think they could do anything physical. I thought they were like
Yes, they
spiritual things, and they couldn't do anything like that. So that got my attention. And he said they looked in the back of the truck, and the back of the truck was full of these things. There was a whole crowd of them in the back of the truck. And I asked him, "Well, what'd you do?" He said, "We drove out of there, almost wrecked a truck." I said, "Well, did they follow you?" He said, "No, they didn't." So that was the only one that I've ever had that actually experimented with them to see what they could find out about them. But here's two different people, two independent persons, proving that they needed the meth to see them. Now, schizophrenics see them in their normal state. They can see the shadow people. It's one of the things they see. But the meth people, a lot of them, they start seeing them when they start using the meth. And they don't seem to be good entities. There's
Now,
nothing good about them.
Lynn, you just mentioned earlier that the entities that are attached to people with addiction issues are different than the ones that are attached to mentally ill or paranoid schizophrenic people. In what way are they different?
Well, for one thing, they're invited. They're invited by the person dabbling in different types of addiction. And it's not just drugs and alcohol, it's sex addiction, it's porno, it's gambling, it's anything that's going to create a rippling effect of negativity in a person's life, as well as their extended families and even into the neighborhood, depending on how outrageous they get when they're under the influence. And I was also listening to what Jerry was saying. Those kind of sound like skinwalkers too, jumping in the back of the truck like that. But they can leave bruises, they can leave bite marks, they can pull hair, they can leave claw marks. Those platforms, when they get matured, they become platforms for demonic or darker entities to enter in on. So I just wanted to mention that too. But please ask me what you had wanted again, so I can make sure that I answer all of that.
Just that, what are the difference between I think you answered it, the entities that people have that have addiction issues and the ones that have entities that are mentally unwell or have paranoid schizophrenia?
The appearance of them, as I had mentioned, that on the girl they looked like potato-sized grapes that were clustered together, almost like on a grapevine. And you could actually see the eyes and the mouth. Usually they're like in a O formation. They don't smile or anything, and they can be inverted. On the person with the addiction, they fit like a neat little backpack, literally shoulders to waist. They hook in at the hips and at the tops of the shoulders. The thing that's very distinct about them is they have a much smaller head in proportion to the body. They look like reptiles, kind of like a lizard looking thing with a tail that curls around. Sometimes those have a human buttocks and no tail. There are spiders and crabs. I don't know if the type of addiction, if it's the luck of the draw, which one you get, or if it's based on drugs versus alcohol versus porno, if you get a certain type. But they do look like those. But on each of them, the bodies, they have this smaller head. They have a fin that starts at the top of their head that goes back and fits into the nape of their neck. It's kind of like a shark fin, but it's not rigid, it's floppy. So it hangs kind of like a kerchief in the back when they're upright. The thing about them is that they're not something that can just be removed. And I've gotten a lot of emails recently of, oh, well, I've had this drug problem, da-da-da-da-da, for X amount of years, and I need you to help me remove my archon. I call them archons. It's not as easy to remove those as it is to remove the ones from a person with schizophrenia, but there's a whole process. There's life change. There's changing maybe people that are around you. Sometimes things in your environment need to be cleaned up. You don't just take them off and then everything is okay, because some of your life choices have brought this onto you to begin with. The difference between the schizophrenic attachments that can reattach and the archons is when a person has dealt with their addiction, the archon will detach, but it never leaves. It always is constantly staying in their realm, trying to coerce them to slip up again, because hey, they had a good thing going. If the guy's an alcoholic, they're just feeding off of that energy and all the negativity that the job loss, sometimes the cheating, this, that, and the other thing that sometimes comes in, or the abuse issues with family members, type thing. So, they want to keep a good thing going. These archonic, they draw on that negativity. It's their candy. They love it. It's their chocolate. So, when they detach, they want to reattach. And that's why it's such a fight for people when they come off of their addiction. It's so important that they have a good support system, and that they stick with their 12-step program if that's what they're doing, or with their religion, or not necessarily religion in the sense of traditional religion, their spirituality, whatever it is that they do, that it takes for them to be able to stay away from the substance and not allow that archon to reattach.
Now, have you experienced someone that you've known that they've had an entity attachment, because Jerry was just speaking whenever he was reading that transcript about, and I made the comment of, well, the entities just seem like they want to get high, right? They seem like they want to get high, they want to get drunk, they want to have sex. Have you experienced that with anyone that you know personally?
My brother was a crack cocaine addict, and he had an archon that would travel with him. And it's not so much the act of the sex and the drugs, it's the negative connotation that comes with it. Sex is a wonderful thing. Lovemaking is even better. But when it's just the act of sex, it's not a loving act. Right. It's more towards the dark than just the light. And I'm not saying that from a biblical thing, because you're exchanging energy with people. When you are doing it as a loving act, that energy is cyclical. It rotates through the body, yours and the person's that you're with. When it's just an act, just for that fling in that moment, just to get satisfaction, which really leaves you empty on the flip side. It doesn't have that connectedness with the energy fields. My brother had overcome, he was also an alcoholic. He overcame his addiction, and he had one of the reptilian archons, which I drew a picture of in my book. And his was the kind with the human buttocks, and it would precede him. Even though he had been 20 years clean, it would precede him. I would be in my house and my kids would be. My kids are empaths too. And I'm like, I would see literally the archon on the ceiling of my house. It would go from corner to corner and across, jumping. And that's why I knew about the fin thing on the head being floppy, because when it would turn its head around, it would flop over its face. And I'd say to my kids, I'd say, oh, Uncle Ray's coming to visit. And my kids would see it too, not just me, or they would mention it. I saw Uncle Ray's friend and I think, he's going to be coming. And lo and behold, within a day or so, I would get a call that he was on his way up to visit my mom and I, and my kids, and from Florida, and he would come on his way. And then as soon as he would get there, it would disappear. But when I also went to visit him in his home in Florida, that thing was in his house, the same thing, and it would frighten my kids. So we even had sometimes when we'd go to stay, we didn't intend on staying on the house. We'd end up staying in a hotel because my kids didn't like having that thing watching them. And again, they're always there enticing you, whispering at you, wanting you to mess up. And that's why addiction is so hard to treat. And again, it's something invited. It's not something that you're born with. It's not something that, you're destined to be because of your dysfunctional family. It's something that you invite into your life, and it never goes away. And that's unfortunate. It gets off of you, but it's always there trying to trip you up.
Yeah, it was really fascinating. I was listening to your discussion with Jay Widener, and you were telling the story of your daughter. Could you maybe reiterate that one? Because that was really mind-blowing story. And I was like, holy crap, this is so nefarious. If you could reiterate that one.
I'll be happy to. During the time that I was dealing with the haunted house that I never moved into, it was that bad. I spent 2 nights there. That was enough. Claw marks and bite marks on my kids, and claw marks on my friend. So I was trying to get someone to come and help me clear the house. So of course I went through all of the yellow pages, calling every church that I could, because that's all that I knew to do at the time. And of course I was turned away by most of them. And I finally got a lady that was American Indian, and she and her friend came to my house, and they pulled into the driveway, and she's looking at the house, and she said, if your house had been built over 3 feet, it would not have been haunted, because I've learned that it's not about the house or the age of the house. It's about the age of the ground that it's built on. So a brand new place can be haunted if it's built in the wrong place. But my daughter had been complaining for weeks about pain in her shoulder and her back area. And I thought, her backpack must have weighed 30 to 50 pounds with all the books in it. So I thought maybe that was doing it. And my daughter at the time was 14 years old. So she wasn't drug seeking. I mean, she didn't even have access to anything like that. All we had in the house was Tylenol and Advil, and cold medicine. So she didn't even, I raised her as a single mother. She didn't even know that that was really an option other than to say no to. So she was complaining of the pain. I got her a rolling backpack, thinking that it was because of the backpack creating pain problems for her. She still complained of the pain. And finally, there was one weekend that I actually took off work because I thought I was going to have to take her to the emergency room. I thought, man, the Tylenol's not working. The Advil's not working. She's complaining of all of this pain. Maybe she's got something ruptured in there or something that she broke her. And I don't want to be negligent as a mother and not go to see about having her treated. And it just so happened that she ended up falling asleep. It was on a Sunday. She fell asleep, and the next day was Monday, when I was supposed to meet these people that were coming to, I call it the haunted mansion, to help clear the house as one final attempt so that I could maybe hopefully move into the house before putting it up for sale. So my daughter was with me that day. I'd kept her out of school, and she was with me, and she was sitting, there was this area with some brick that you could sit on like a planter, and she was sitting on that in front of the house. This house was a half-acre lot. The house was recessed back in, so it had kind of a long driveway where she couldn't even hear us talking. And when the lady got out of the car, she pointed at my daughter and she said, is she complaining of pain in her shoulder? And I was kind of taken back by it because I thought, well, yeah, we hadn't even discussed that. I mean, I didn't even imagine that that could be something other than a physiological thing. And I said, well, yeah, as a matter of fact, she has. And she said, well, I'm not surprised because it's a big one too. And she has an attachment on her shoulder. And I mean, again, I'm like, what? I had no idea that something like that could happen. And then the lady energetically did something with her hand, pulled it back, and then all of a sudden she and her friend are both stomping whatever it is that she'd pulled off of my daughter from that distance energetically into the ground. And she asked me, she said, ask your daughter how her shoulder feels. And I said, Brittany, how's your shoulder feeling? And she starts moving her shoulder, and all of a sudden she's doing this helicopter thing with her arm. And she said, it feels fine. I said, is your pain gone? And she acknowledged that it was gone. And I mean, and after that, she had no problem. There was no more complaints of pain or anything at all. But she had gotten an attachment in that haunted house by those things or wherever she had picked it up.
That's unbelievable that these entities are so nefarious that they would attach to a young teenage girl in order to get her on some sort of pain medication to infiltrate into her mind.
Well, this happens a lot, though. I mean, there are a lot of people with pain pill addictions that would have never have had those addictions if they hadn't had an attachment that would create pain that they were seeking relief for.
That's true.
And a lot of these people, as the dark and the light, the darkness doesn't like the light because the light exposes what's in the darkness, and it's, they like to dub it out. The darkness likes to dub it out for people, and it can totally derail somebody's, in their direction or make their path harder of the goals that they want to accomplish if they inflict that. So, yeah, I mean, look at these people with somatic illnesses. They have somatic illnesses, and they claim that the people, they're very, very real to them, that they have pain and things like that, but that they're making it up. I don't know. I'd be looking at them in a little bit of a different way, because the pain is very real to them, even though there's not a physiological reason for it.
Yeah, Jerry was talking last time that he was on about a physical manifestation of the voices outside of the patient, and he was experiencing the crackling on the wall and crackling on the ceiling. Have you experienced anything like that other than the scratches and the things that you've seen on patients and stuff like that? Have you seen a literal physical manifestation outside from the voices that can influence our 3D physical reality?
Well, I mean, other than seeing, and I hope I'm answering this correctly, other than seeing like the backpacks or seeing that thing jumping from the ceiling, and I see things a lot. I go into homes, and I've had to clear homes of entities. People usually, when they call you first, the first thing they think it's a demon, and most of the time it's not. But I see the things a lot of times. So I don't know if that's what you are asking in that way. I mean, I see them. I've seen them when people are passing. I see their loved ones coming in. I've seen things that look like aliens, even on the other side, that have come in to gather people. I've seen aliens. Those sorts of things too. So,
well, maybe not necessarily something that you can see because you have an ability to see them. Have you seen something that can take on a physical manifestation that could move an object, right? Or walk around your kitchen and swing open kitchen and cabinet doors, open the refrigerator, slam a door shut?
yes, and that's actually coming out in my fourth book that I'm writing right now, that is called the Omnipresent series, called No Place Like Home. I just recently inherited a house. My sister passed away in June, and I go in, I'm aware that there's a male spirit and a female spirit in the house, but there's also something else. So I go in ready to, all bells and whistles, to help the souls cross over and to get whatever is out of there so that the house can be either moved into or sold or rented to somebody. And the traditional things that I use, which everybody, if you're dealing with something of a darker level other than just spirits, ghosts, sage pisses them off. It doesn't clear them. It actually, if it's a demon, it tickles them. It makes them angrier. So you have to use something much stronger. And actually, I try to avoid doing demons because it's above my pay grade. And I really only do it for friends and close family if I have to. I hate doing that part. But poltergeists, things like that, poltergeists are different than demons. Anyway, I went in with all of what I knew to do. I went in with literally with fire, and because the fire component that I use sucks in the air, and if there are spirits in the room, they're given the option to leave. If they choose not to leave, they're sucked into the fire and stuck in the pan, and something in the bottom of the pan. So I'm not going to tell what my components are. I'll tell you in private, but I don't want people doing this at home and then coming back and saying, "Oh, we heard this on Ryder's show, and our house burnt down," and then there's a big lawsuit. Yeah. Anyway, it didn't work, and I'm like, I'm not afraid of ghosts. I've seen demons. I've seen hell dogs. I've seen, I'm not afraid of them. It's kind of like I've become neutralized to them or something. But this particular thing, my half sister who didn't see things was seeing in the house. My son was seeing it in my sister's house. I was seeing it. It would shift change. Sometimes it would show up as my father, but it didn't feel right. Sometimes it would show up as my sister, but it didn't feel right. And then I would find it shift changed into my father showing up in his ugly red and white paisley golf pants and his red shirt. And I remember thinking, "Dad, oh, that's so ugly. We hated that when you were alive. Why would you be on the other side wearing something like that?" And then I found a picture of him in that exact outfit upstairs in a room where there was this rock that was a piece of part of the problem. But I reached out to two of my friends that do remote viewing, and that one of them is Katie Turner, who is an excellent psychic. She's been on TV. She's my go-to person for many, many things. She's excellent. Turns out that I had an elemental in the house. I'd never dealt with anything like that before. I'm like, "Oh yeah, those people take care of elementals. That's not my thing." But it turned out that there was an elemental in the house that couldn't be removed by the traditional means normally, because the elemental was created when the earth was created and way before any kind of religion, for the lack of a better word, was even created. So blessings and prayers and sage and frankincense and myrrh and all of that, none of it worked. Basically, it's like, he's standing there. What have you got? It was this little tiny thing under 3 feet tall, literally looked like the bankers on Harry Potter. Because my son would
little goblin guy.
Yes, and my son was standing there, and I see him. I don't say anything, and I'm standing in the hallway. My son's standing in the bedroom doorway of my sister's room, and there were two other bedrooms, and it comes from this third bedroom. Turns out my sister brought a rock into the bedroom that belonged to the thing, and that's what he was coming for. And I remember seeing the rock. I almost threw it away. Thank God I didn't. It was an ugly rock, but he likes his rock. So he comes in, he passes in front of me and goes to the bedroom, and my son's watching me, says, "Did you just see Hogwarts go by?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I did." And then he comes back, passes my son, passes me, goes back to the bedroom. Then he comes out again, only this time he's got balloons of all of these faces in a wreath that were souls that he had collected for his own entertainment and to draw energy from. My half-sister the night before had been sleeping in my sister's room. She said that something kept waking her up. And when she opened her eyes, she saw this wreath of faces all around her. Now, being empaths and spiritual, we see these things a lot. So most people would get up and run screaming out of the room after they wet themselves. But with us, it's kind of like, okay, you need to move along and just, go away. But unbeknownst to her, this little troll thing was standing next to the bed, holding them like balloons. They were his balloons. And so when he came back into the hallway the third time to pass in front of me and then into my brother, those balloon faces in that wreath were there that my sister had described seeing the night before. So I wasn't able to use the traditional things to get it out, but he can shift change. He can shift change into an animal. He can literally, a possum or cat or something else that he can do. And my son and I, it's more of a negotiation thing at the time. They hate people. And in order to keep him out of the house while I could get the things, my sister's belongings out of the house, we've literally had to negotiate with baked goods and rum and tobacco and things like that and crystals to keep him out of the house. And we gave him back his rock. So the next, and we gave him a shed space to stay in, literally. And I can't say the words that he uses, but his favorite, he loves to drop F-bombs. And yeah, and they're triple in a row. That's his favorite. F-bomb is his favorite term for me. And as my son and I were getting ready to leave, we made the announcement, we're going to be leaving tomorrow. You're not allowed in the house until we leave. And if you stay in your own area, we will give you something before we leave. And then there was a leak in the faucet. So we ended up having to stay an extra day. And of course, you could hear this thing when we came back into the house grumbling. He sounded kind of like the Tasmanian devil on Bugs Bunny with that grumbling. And then the F-bomb, F-bomb, F-bomb. So my son is loading the truck that evening because we were leaving then the next day. And all of a sudden I hear these F-bombs. And I'm running to the door because I'm thinking that my son has hurt himself in some way because he's loading some heavy things onto the truck. And I open the door and there he stands right at the door. And I said, "Are you all right?" And he said, "What?" And I said, "Why were you yelling obscenities outside the F-bombs?" He said, "That wasn't me." Now we're on a 2-acre lot out in the country. And it was right outside that door. So we figured that it was the little troll in the backyard. So that next morning when we went to leave, my son had his car running. He had the truck that I was driving running, and he was in the truck hooking up my charger from my phone. And I'm standing on the deck. And all of a sudden I hear F-bomb, F-bomb, F-bomb. And again, I'm thinking that it's my son. So I walk over, the door's open, and I said, "What's the matter?" And he said, "Nothing. I'm just hooking up your phone charger." And I said, "Why?" And before I could even get it out, we both hear F-bomb, F-bomb, F-bomb. It was that little thing. And he's literally from the shed, from the backyard where the F-bombs were being blurted out. He wanted to make sure that we knew that he was waiting for his treat before we left. I had a paranormal group at the house this past weekend with EVP readings and things like that. And they experienced him as well. So it's not just me. It was a whole team. They definitely got some EVP readings. We got some video of some things that they're going to be posting actually on Facebook coming soon. Not of him, but there were some spirits that were talking about him being in the shed. They identified that they had seen, it's a Puckwedgie or Bogart, whatever it's called in that elemental realm. So not only do we have all of the spiritual stuff going on, we have some other things going on that, influence people too. So it's like.
That just brings in a whole other question
Yeah.
of what's going on here. I mean, are there entities out there that don't need to be attached to somebody? And then that brings on a whole host of other questions. But really quickly, Jerry, I know that you explained the story last time about you sitting in your office and hearing the crackling sound. Just to reiterate that, can the voices, in your opinion and in your study and your research by working with paranoid schizophrenic patients, can the voices take on a physical aspect and influence our 3D reality?
Well, like Lynn said, I've seen several prisoners that had scratches across their back. It's like these 4 fingers just went right across their back. And, had that happened in the prison, there would have been a fight. If somebody scratched somebody like that, but like Lynn was saying, there's no way anybody could do that. You can't get your hand around there to scratch the middle of your back like that. And he showed me that one morning. He said, "They attacked me last night." So they can do that. They can make people feel sick. They can make people feel paranoid. They can make people feel depressed. When I was working psych crisis in the emergency rooms, I could feel them. I couldn't see them, I couldn't hear them, but I could feel them. And it was like this icky electrical feeling. There's no other feeling in the planet like that. And the patients couldn't lie to me. I'd ask them, are you hearing voices? And they'd say, oh no, I'm not hearing voices. They wanted to get out of there. And I said, yes, you are. And this is how strong they are. And they'd say, well, how do you know that? Are you crazy too? Or I'd be like, no, but I can't see them, I can't hear them, but I can feel them, and I feel them coming off of you strong. So I could feel how angry they were at what I was telling these patients also. But like Lynn, I couldn't tell anybody that.
No, and the thing is too is my son, when we spent the second night in that house, that haunted house, he woke up that morning with bite marks on his legs, and they were purple bite marks that looked like a dog bite. But I had a little schnauzer at the time, but the mouth was smaller than it would be on a dog, but too large to be like a rat. But you could literally count the teeth and the purple bruises that he had on his legs. And the night before, he took a bath and he put on his, I don't remember, his Bob the Builder or whatever it was that he put on, the little shorts and the matching pajama shirt, and there was nothing on him. So he woke up that morning, whatever happened to him happened in that house during the night of whatever was in there that bit him. So they can leave claw marks, bruises, and bite marks. And the people that I had bought the house from, after I sold it, I tracked them down and mentioned to them, were you aware that the house was haunted? And I eventually spoke to the wife, and she was telling me too that her kids were showing up with mysterious dog bite marks and bruises that couldn't be explained, and that sort of thing in that house as well.
Lynn, so, yes, did you ever see these things on any other schizophrenics that you were working with on the psych ward there?
Not,
or was it just that one?
Just that one that day. I didn't really get to be close enough to any of them because like I said, I had been assigned a person, actually two different people that were suicidal, another one that was two of them that were addicts. And I never actually was assigned to the schizophrenic. So that's why I went around asking my other fellow students, does your person have schizophrenia? And they're like, yes. I just kept getting those with, like I said, with, they tried to commit suicide or whatever.
Well, what did you see with those guys, the suicidal ones?
Their arc fields were distorted. They did have breaks in their window shield, so to speak, and but I didn't see any attachments on them per se. But that doesn't mean that they didn't have an influence in their house of some form that wasn't also telling them these things in their ear. I mean, they're always around. These spirits are always around everywhere, and you just have to either have a field that's large enough to push them away, or to be aware of your thoughts, that they're not your thoughts, that normally you wouldn't think of, like you were talking about the guy needing to poop, you would never think of something like that on your own. But they're always still trying to interject things to make you doubt yourself, or to see how far you will listen and go with that way. But people, they definitely have cracks in their windshields when they're suffering from that severe depression that they would consider suicide or something, and it does leave them open to influence.
Okay, what you were saying is an important point. It's not just the schizophrenics who hear these things. We all hear them.
We do all the time.
They come into these things, inject thoughts into your mind that you think are you. Okay, but like I was talking to Ryder earlier, any negative thought about yourself or anybody else comes from the dark side.
That's true.
It's not your thought. Okay, the intention of that thought is not your intention. You would never do the kind of things that these things are telling you to do. Like, they might tell you to, hey, smack the guy in front of you, or do this, something you never would do on your own.
That's
and
true.
They're telling you, just do that, or tell this guy off, or do something that would create turmoil.
Absolutely.
They don't want you to be peaceful. They don't want you to be loving. They're the opposite of that. And if you listen to them, you will become them.
And love actually is a repellent for them.
They hate it.
They hate it. They do. Absolutely, because they are not able to experience that emotion. And it is a repellent. And that's why I even tell people, if you're in a room and there's something creepy and you can't leave the room, start singing a joyous song or just saying, I love you, I love you, I love you, out into the thing. I said, it will push them away. I mean, I've had, for instances, where I have seen entities that have come into the room that weren't so friendly during clearings. And I would say to them, I'd sit down and I'd say, come forth. I want to teach you a lesson on love. They'd look at each other and dart out of the room so fast, like there was a stench in the room. They don't like any kind of love or joy. They want to totally just keep keep people suffering.
Are you guys good to go for just a little bit longer? I have a few more questions, and I also want to touch on a little bit of, Lynn, when you're working with the care patients that are getting ready to pass away. Are we okay? Or
yeah, I'm
sure.
good.
Perfect. Okay, so really quickly, Serene1 sent a $5 super sticker. Thanks so much for your kindness, generosity, and support of the show. Serene1, really appreciate you. So from my understanding, the paranoid schizophrenia diagnosis has been around for a really long time, like since the 1800s, according to Jerry's book. And the reason that I bring that up is because some people believe that they hear voices that are different than their own. And it's not their own thoughts it's coming from. It's coming from an outside source, but not the way that Jerry is describing it. They believe that this outside source is some form of technology, which to me makes no sense, because paranoid schizophrenia has been happening for over 200 years before technology was invented, before cell phones, before radio, before TV, before the internet, right? Now, I'm not saying that it's not possible that technology can't do something like that, because we've really only had, this kind of technology for around 30 years now, right? And we have no idea the long-term effects but that doesn't stop people from 100% being convinced that technology is to blame, which I feel is a 100% scapegoat. But I want to get your thoughts on this, Jerry.
Well, the voices want people to feel as paranoid as they possibly can. They will tell them any kind of lie to make them paranoid and miserable. Okay. And now the government does have that kind of technology. So the voices might tell them, yeah, the government is spying on you. See, it does exist. And try to convince them that it is the government spying on them, when it's, in fact, the voices are playing that. They can play any person. They can go into your mind, and they can pull up every rotten thing you've ever done and rub it in your face to create this negative emotional state that they need to feed off of. The worst I've seen was, at a funeral, we'll say this one girl was badly abused by this uncle or somebody, mentally, physically, and emotionally. And at his funeral, she attended his funeral, and she's like, thank God he's dead. The voices returned and said, no, I'm not dead. You remember when we did this, or this happened to you, or whatever, and left her thinking that this guy was still plaguing her. Okay. So they will pull any kind of trick they can to make you feel paranoid, miserable, to drive you down to that negative emotional energy level that they can feed off of. They are parasites. They are feeding off of all of us, not just schizophrenics.
That's very true. Very true. And, also, as far as the electronic things too, they can manipulate those.
Oh, yeah.
They can come through radios. People have heard them come through TVs, voices and things like that. So they can manipulate that as well. And that might be where the electronic thing is being said. I mean, back in the 1800s, you were either considered a witch if you had the ability to have empathic abilities, and you were hung. And then they had to slap the name of schizophrenia on there, which is kind of a broad term for, a couple of things. Mental illness, they kind of scoop them all under there, because, as Jerry's explained, they really don't know what to do with it. There isn't anything other than a check sheet that they give people when they come in. Do you hear voices? Yes. Do you want to harm yourself? Yes or no? And you go down the check sheet, and then they put it through a machine or they grade it themselves, and that's how they determine what you have. But it just, and even those questions aren't overly clear. You're like, well, maybe, on Monday, sometimes I feel like I'm depressed, but on Tuesday I'm fine. But they don't give you that gray area. So it's
there
either
is
yes
no
or no.
test.
Yeah,
There is no test. There is no lab test. There is no EEG. There is no test for any mental illness.
Nope.
These were all made up by the psychiatric mafia and big pharma. They want to sell drugs, and they will come up with any concoction they can sell that people will buy. And none of these drugs cure any mental illness. All they do is tamp down symptoms. And the side effects are horrendous, especially with the antipsychotic drugs. Like we said, they shrink your brain with long-term use. They do physiological damage. Those side effects are toxic side effects from these poisonous drugs. They're the result of these poisonous drugs that they're feeding these guys, and they're feeding these things to children now. They got hundreds of thousands of children on these antipsychotic drugs, destroying their brains. These people have no conscience.
That's true. And with the adverse effects that they create, then there are additional medications need to be taken to correct those areas that are affected.
Yeah, like Cogentin. So they start experiencing these negative side effects of the drugs. So then they pile on another drug that masks the side effects of the first drug. So the person is being destroyed, but they can't feel it.
Yeah.
A numbing agent. Yeah, I try and tell people that are convinced that the government is doing this to them and planting thoughts and ideas into your head. I'm like, why? Why would they do that? What would be the purpose of them doing that? The government doesn't care about you. Government doesn't care about me. Like why would they feel the need to randomly just do that?
Control.
Yep. They want to keep everybody in that herd mentality and keep everybody in check. They don't want you to question anything different.
They want you to be fear and turn to them. Like,
absolutely.
Oh yeah, you're afraid of this? Well, yeah, turn to us. We got drugs for that. We got this for that. So they create the problem and they also create the solution.
No, I mean more. I understand that with the drugs, absolutely. I mean more of the people that think that their voices that they're hearing in their head is coming from the government, right? Why would the government ever do that? Yeah, they have the capability to do it. There is patents that would do that, but why would they just randomly do that to a bunch of random people?
Well, they don't do it to random people. They choose them very carefully, and a lot of times they choose psychotic people. And what they do is they do it for these mass shootings, where these people wake up and they go, I don't even remember doing this. So they want to get rid of the guns. So the more mass shootings that they can make happen, the better their chances. They go, well, we got to take away the guns. It's not guns that shoot people. It's people who shoot people. And the mental health system on the planet has been taken over by big pharma and the psychiatric mafia. Nobody's getting better with this mental health system. It's a friggin' drug-fueled merry-go-round. Nobody's getting better. They're just being drugged.
Yep, right through the revolving door. Now, Lynn, before we wrap up here, I want to speak to you about something that a lot of people have all kinds of questions for. They always want to know what happens after death. And you working with these end-of-life care patients, what is your experience with death and what, to your knowledge, happens after we die? Now, I know that that's a loaded question and no one really actually knows exactly what happens when we die, but from your understanding.
From what I have seen with my own eyes, I've seen hundreds of people pass away, being in end-of-life care, being a nurse for over 30 years. Actually, I have been a nurse for 40 years. I turned 60 in May. So I have seen a lot of people pass away in 17 years in end-of-life care. And I've seen a beauty to death. If anybody can imagine that, there are certain things that happen. I've been able to see it from a nursing medical perspective. So I'm watching the body transition and go through the normal changes in breathing, changes in circulation and flow, while I'm also seeing the loved ones coming in as well. I've have a couple of really one thing that really brought it home for me is I had a patient that was blind. I think I mentioned this. Jerry's heard this story a couple of times. This lady was on my unit for about 2 weeks. I didn't know her that well. Her son and daughter come to the nurse's station. Mom's talking to people that are in the room that are not there. And of course, I know and seeing people coming to collect their loved ones over and over again. And so I told them, I said, I'll come down with you and check on your mama and see if there's anything that she needs to make her more comfortable. And I got down to the room, and of course, she's sitting at a slant and she's reaching up into the sky like she's being handed something very fragile, like a snowflake or something. And she's smiling. She's very happy with whatever it is she's doing. And I said to her, I said, Edna, who's here? And she said, George. And her daughter turned as white as a sheet and had to sit down because she said, George is my father. My father's been dead for X amount of years. And then Edna speaks up and she says, and he's glad that you're taking good care of Pixie. Well, Pixie was Edna's poodle. And when George passed away, the poodle had to be taken over by the son who because Edna couldn't care for the dog being blind. Now, Edna couldn't see shadows or anything. She could see nothing. So the son said to me, he said, well, do you think that my mom is hallucinating? And I said, I can't just come out and say, oh, no, I don't think she's hallucinating. I think your father's really here, to help her cross over. And so I said, I put it back to him and I said, well, do you think she's hallucinating? And he said, well, I don't know. And I said to him, I said, well, I'm not trying to change your religious beliefs or whatever, you understand to be, is this process. I said, but do you mind if I ask your mom if I try something? And he said, no, go ahead. And I said, Edna, can I ask George a question? And she nodded her head, yes. And I said, what color is your son's shirt? And Edna said, yellow. Well, keep in mind that she's totally blind and she can't see anything. But as a person starts to transition into death, their filters efface, and their ability to hear the telepathy from the other side, they can hear the communication as well as they can hear the communication of the embodied soul verbalizing on this side. So George told her what color shirt the son had on, and she relayed that. And the son immediately got it, and he said, hi, Dad. He realized that that was impossible. I've had so many, for instances, of people that are actively getting ready to pass, and sometimes they start seeing loved ones coming in even a year in advance. I've got a couple of things. I'll be happy to share them with you if you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this is a very fascinating topic, and being able to see the soul transition over to the other side, because there's a lot of people that even doubt that there's even a other side, or that there's even a spirit realm, or that there's a realm that exists outside of this 3D physical reality. I mean, a lot of people think that you just die and that's it.
Well, they're going to have
lost somebody. Didn't you just lose somebody in your family, Lynn?
My sister just passed away.
Okay, and I was talking to Lynn just maybe a week or so after her sister died. I mean, she wasn't depressed. She wasn't the maid. She looked like she is just right now. I mean, there was no depression. There was, there's probably some sadness, but she came across like she is right now. Well, there wasn't any devastating.
Yeah, I'm actually very happy for her. I mean, where she's at, everybody wants to be. I mean, the feeling of the love and elation that comes through from the spirit realm while they're getting ready to help the person transition, there are no words to describe it, and there's no feeling that can touch it. It just is, and it's impossible to describe in our words. The feeling of the love and the warmth and the elation that comes from that other side that you get to partake in if you're open to it in the room. Jerry, which do you think would be better, telling the story about my mother passing and seeing her come out of her body, or the one about Abigail who had visitors prior to her death? Or I can tell both.
Well, certainly your mother.
Okay.
That impressed me, because you were standing there watching this happen.
I was my mother. The thing about people is a lot of times before they are getting ready to pass, a lot of them will know, and they'll start talking about it. They'll say, oh, Uncle Joe, would you please take care of my cat if something happens to me? And everybody's like, oh, no, don't talk like that. And then the next day they cross over. My mother herself was going around the facility that she was in at the time, and she was telling people that she was going to go home tomorrow, that she was crossing over. As a matter of fact, she even told a lady whose dog had passed away just a couple of days before that she would keep an eye on her dog for her on the other side until the lady could pass over and get there. And sure enough, my mother passed away at around 1:30 the very next day. My mother was transferred to hospice. They called us, said that it was that she was starting to transition, and I went to the facility with my son and got there just pretty much in time. My mom was kind of in and out, and I stayed with her that evening. My brother was on his way trying to get there, and he wasn't able to make it in time. And then I had to leave to take my son home. But when I returned by myself. And as I'm sitting there, my mother was no longer able to open her eyes, and she wasn't able to verbalize anymore. She had lost her swallowing reflex and everything. That's usually one of the first things to go physically when this starts to happen. But she, and just to back up a little bit, sometimes people choose to leave early and they just leave the body there to finish, like my sister did in June. She left about 35 minutes before her body actually finished. My mother chose to stay until the last minute. She wanted to keep up with everything that was going on. So, and this was apparent because she would, when people would come in the room, she would move her eyebrows up and down and try to move her mouth to verbalize. And it was appropriate. People would come in and say, hi, Phyllis, and then she would stop. So as I'm sitting next to her, and I'm kind of speeding this up just a little bit, I'm sitting in a recliner next to her chair. Opposite of her bed, this ectoplasm or plasm started to form, kind of a misting in the room, and I could see movement on the other side. I could see a shoulder peek out or a pant leg peek out. And yes, people, they do show up in clothes. Nobody wants to see mom naked, meet you there at the pearly gates. I'm just saying pearly gates, but most would be like, mom, get some clothes on. It wouldn't be a joyous time to be greeted by your mother or father naked. So they do show up in clothes most of the time. I've only seen one naked ghost, and that's in another book that's just finishing editing as well.
Now, whenever you see these, whatever you would call them, possibly angels or whatever it is that they are they at their like prime state of their physical body, or are they as old as they were when they died?
You will see them the way that you remember them last. However, the median age in heaven is around 30, 35. So that's when we're considered at our form when the body gets to its peak of an age, and physically at about 35, then it starts to decline. Age-wise. So we technically are in our 30s on the other side, but you will see them the way that you remember them last. As my mother was laying there, again, she was also at a slant. The end towards her bed started to efface, and I saw my mother's mother, my grandmother, step in, and she looked the exact same as I remembered seeing her. She had her tight little 1980s curly perm, and it even presented in her glasses, and she had the leisure suit on that she had made for herself. And she walked into the room, and she went to my mother's bedside, and she started to stroke the inside of my mother's forearm, and she would lean forward to my mother and say something in my mother's ear, and my mother would respond with the eyebrows and the mouthing thing as my grandmother would stand back. And then my grandmother went forward again 2 other times in addition to this, 3 times total, and my mother was responding. And behind my grandmother, I could see this frantic wave, and my sister's perfume filled the room. My youngest sister was murdered by a jealous boyfriend when she was 20, and she was frantically waving. And like I said, her perfume, she had an unusual perfume that she wore back in the 80s called Latisse, and she presented into the room. And she actually came around the misting and embraced me. I could feel her hair falling over my face. I could smell her. I could feel her essence. And when she went to go back around, the whole wall had effaced. And there were hundreds of people in there. And there were also some beings there that looked like they were from somewhere else. And this is where I try to explain to people that are into the galactic thing versus the spiritual thing, that it's all connected. We've got to figure that we are made of energy. And if you want to go from a scientific place, energy can't be created or destroyed. And when we leave our bodies, we don't die, we just shed and go, but our energy has to go somewhere. And you've got to figure that with as many sunshines out there, there are stars out there, that there are suns for other solar systems, that it would be ignorant to think that we were the only ones. There are other life forms in other solar systems, maybe even people just like us. But when my mother passed away, I'm sitting there. I told her, I said, Mom, Graham and Robin are here. It's time for you to go. And she mouthed at me and moved her eyebrows up and down. I kissed her. I told her I would be okay, that I would see her, soon. And that's another thing too. If people could imagine death not as with the finality that they think of it as, but they will see their dog, they'll see their mother, they'll see the person again. This is not the last time that you're going to see them. They kind of look at it more like going on a long vacation versus a death, because you will see them again. And yes, pets do cross over as well. So
now, some people, Lynn, think that the reason that people see these visions and these their loved ones and stuff is because of the release of DMT in the brain among death.
Well, I wasn't the one dying, and I was seeing it too. I'm not dead. I'm hopefully not anywhere close to being dead. I'm relating what I'm seeing. My mother wasn't telling me this. This is what I was seeing, and I've seen it again and again and again and again. It's just that with my mother, when she took her last breath about 10 minutes later, and I'm watching, and at the head of her bed, I see a group of spirits kind of huddling around like a football huddle and layered like a peony flower. When they opened, my mother's spirit was standing in the center, kind of like they were trying to stabilize her spiritual feet. And my mother was beaming from ear to ear, and all of these people were coming to her, to greet her. I mean, there was this huge reception. It was a beautiful reception. And a lot of the people, not a lot, some of the people I recognized from this lifetime. My grandmother, uncles that had passed first, a cousin, some friends and things like that had crossed over. And some I did not, but my mother recognized them. So she knew who these people were. And
so you noticed your mother was also noticing exactly what you were seeing as well.
Yes.
Incredible.
As in spirit form. I mean, and the thing is to see how elated she was, and to get to feel that reception and that warmth coming over. I mean, to me, in that moment, it was such a beautiful thing. I wanted to step, and I said, hey, I want to come to the party too, not that I wanted to die. I just wanted to step in for the day. And then I knew I had to go home as a single mom and take care of kids. But in that moment, you become so engrossed in it that it's like food that is your favorite that you didn't know you were missing until you experienced it again, if that even makes sense. I don't know how to put it into human words, but I was even able to look into the other side. And I mean, there are colors there that we would need multiple color wheels. And it's not just that they're colors, they are living colors. When you connect with them, there's almost a pulsing energy about the colors and the flowers and the grass and, all of the things that they have there that I was able to look into and get to see with my mother. As my mother was greeted, the room kind of thinned out. At that time too, I looked over and noticed that my mother had stopped breathing. And of course, when you're in that elation and you're sensitive and open to it, you can't help but smile. So I'm sitting there grinning from ear to ear. My mother has just stopped breathing. And I all of a sudden have that moment of sense. And I say, oh my God, I better call the nurse to come in and pronounce my mom dead, because if the nurse comes walking in and I'm sitting here smiling and my mother's just died, that's not a normal response. They might think that I did something to her. So I went ahead and I called the nurse, and the nurse came in and pronounced her dead. And she walked through all of the festivities that were going on. They didn't seem to be bothered by her. Everything continued on. And as the room thinned, there were 5 souls along with my mother and my sister that kind of lingered. 2 of them were angels. There were these other entities that were very, very tall. They didn't have wings, but they appeared to be the level of angels, but they also appeared to be from somewhere else. So that is why I say that there are beings from other places on the other side, because when they finish out their life cycles on whatever solar system that they're in or planet that they are on, they have to go someplace too. And they were part of the procession for my mother, you know, assisting her to go out past me. And the thing was, is they passed me, each of them made contact with the top of my head, and it felt kind of tingly. So that was a very, very, I never grieved my mother's, my mother and I were very close, but I never grieved her leaving, because for one thing, I know where she is, you know, and how could I deny, I mean, how could I want to hold her back from that? You know, I mean, it just, life doesn't really begin until you die. So it just, yeah, I mean, it was a very, very beautiful thing. And as I had mentioned coming forward, also, just to say too, my mother is still in communication with me. I don't have control over it. She comes through when she wants to. She leaves beautiful she had long hair like mine, but it was opalescent white, and she leaves hairs. Even to this day, I have moved twice. I have a different car, and I am still, Thanksgiving last year, I found one of her hairs laying across one of the dining room seats. I find her hairs everywhere still, and she and I had an agreement before she passed away that she would leave me her hairs. And even on the day of her funeral, I went to draw a bath, and on the top of the bubbles, laying lengthwise, was one of her hairs. So they can do this. They can move things. They can leave things for you to let you know that they're still around. I had for instance, with my mother too, where I was in my psych class, but in the classroom part of it, and we had a very, very hard test that day. I had gone originally, before coming to the classroom, to the bookstore. I had to get a 3-ring binder and some loose leaf papers for the class to bring to class with me. So I went straight from the bookstore to the classroom, and I opened up that 3-ring binder to put the loose leaf papers in, and in the second ring, looped, was one of my mother's hairs in the teeth. Now, there's no way that they could have gotten there. And even if it was a fluke, it made me feel comforted. It was a day that I was taking a very hard test, and I didn't feel totally prepared for it, but it let me know that she was there supporting me. So with my sister, who recently passed in June, she was actually in the intensive care unit. So I didn't have the privacy that I had with my mother in hospice. There were all the beeping lights and the nurses coming in and out, but I could see the misting also when she left, and I knew that she left her body about 35 minutes before the body actually stopped. I've even seen spirits leave a day in advance, and sometimes the body just stays there to finish, and they're standing next to everybody else that way. Or I've seen them, you know, transcend through. I've had patients that are close to their time seeing other people's spirits. I had a lady that had Alzheimer's that I had known her for 7 years. I'd been at the facility for 10 years. I had known her for 7 years. And I remember when she was up walking around talking to people, and she had declined so much with her Alzheimer's that she hadn't spoken one word in 3 years. And I see her tooling around the hallway in her wheelchair, scooting along, and she stops in front of the nurse's station. And just beyond her, continuing into the hallway, the first door on the right, there was a lady that was actively passing. And I had just come on shift. I'm going into the back to get my charts together to check the orders on things for people. And I overhear a lady yelling, "Take me home, take me home, please, please take me home." And I come out of the back, and I'm looking in the hallway, and there's nobody there, but Shirley's sitting there in her wheelchair. So I assumed that one of the CNAs or the other nurses had addressed the issue with whoever it was yelling, "Take me home," because it couldn't be Shirley, you know. So I turn around to go back into the back area, and all of a sudden I hear again, "Take me home, please, please take me home." And I turn around, and it's Shirley. Shirley's the one that's calling out. And I went over to her and I said, "Shirley," I said, who are you asking to take you home?" And she says, look at the angels. Aren't they beautiful? And she pointed in the direction of the woman's room that was passing. And of course, I looked down the hallway, didn't see anything at first, but then I looked again, and I could see the angels and the loved one of this woman bulging out of the wall into the hallway. And the woman passed away within about an hour, within a short time after that. But Shirley, who was 3 months from her own death, was sitting there, and she could see the loved ones that had come in to collect this other lady and was yelling out to them to take her home.
That's incredible.
Sorry.
There's some people in the chat that were talking earlier that they didn't grieve their mother either, that they know that she's in a better place. And yeah, sorry guys, I'm not ignoring the chat. I'm just trying to stay on it with this conversation here, but we're going to wrap up here in just a second. But really quickly, that's an incredible story about your mother, by the way, Lynn. What do we think of sleep paralysis? Is sleep paralysis a entity? Is it a demon? Do you have any thoughts and views on what sleep paralysis is?
It's associated with people leaving their bodies.
Mm-hmm.
They astral travel in a lot of cases.
Interesting.
Like
Lynn, do you have any thoughts?
Well, like half in and half out. I mean, there have been some, for instances, I mean, I know that myself, I've had that happen where I was laying there, can only move my eyeballs. And a lot of times with that too, when you're coming back in, sometimes people will notice dark things that are around them, which become scary. So they affiliate it with a demon or something that's stopping them, which could be stopping them from re-entering their body completely at that point. But then they eventually get back in. But I agree with Jerry. I mean, there's really not a definite answer for that of what it is, because it is what he said, that they're kind of half in and half out and coming back in. Usually the paralysis happens when they're in that twilight sleep kind of waking up thing, and they're paralyzed. They had a lady that was on a show with Sylvia Brown that was talking about her sleep paralysis during a time that she was away. She had purchased a haunted house and she'd gone through all of this stuff, and she had a little boy, and she could hear him breathing weird, and she was kind of in that twilight sleep. And when she woke up, she could only move her eyeballs, but she could literally feel an entity raping her. And it was distinct because when this happens, there are like eggplant purple bruises all down the insides of their legs, all over the pubic mound and the female parts when this happens, because they, as I said, they can leave bruises, they can leave nasty ones. And
sounds like an incubus or a succubus, right?
Yes, yes. And so, I mean, you could have something like that trolling you as well. I mean, you have stalkers in life, you've got stalkers in the spirit realm too. The thing is if they don't cross over, those sorts of things don't change. Something else I'd like to mention real quick before we close up. One thing that I did notice about my sister when she passed away is that we had her cremated. She wanted to have her ashes taken to the ocean. And so I was holding the box close to me, wrapped in a towel. And I couldn't believe how, when you leave behind your body, how all of that negative stuff stays with the ashes and with the body. I mean, the depression, the anger, the jealousy, the fight you had with your mother. I mean, all of that is in those ashes that get left behind, and it has a negative energy about them that you can actually pick up on and feel. And granted, it feels familiar because that was also part of them while they were alive, as well as the good, which we all have our moments. So, but the thing was, is it was so strong that I couldn't stand to continue to carry it with me. I went back and put her in a sand pail so that I could hold it away from my body and carry her into the ocean and submerge her into the ocean so it didn't blow anywhere. But the thing was, is with that experience and learning that, so many people want to carry a little bit of mom's ashes in a pendant, in a pendant that they wear around their neck. It's not about having it in your house, but they want to wear it close to their body. And granted, it does feel familiar, even though it's not necessarily the great part of mom. you want to kind of think about that before you do that, because it does have kind of a negative pull about it.
Yeah, and I can second that. With people who do leave their body, don't have any emotional anything. There's no emotions. They look down at their body laying in the bed, and it's like, oh, so what? There's no negative emotions. They don't carry that with them. There's no negative memories.
That's
That
true.
all, like Lynn said, they're all left behind. They
Mhm.
don't go to the other side.
Yeah, the spirit, like Jerry was saying, the spirit goes to the other side, but all the gunk is left behind.
Right.
So yeah, they don't care. They're not, they don't have any of those negative emotions anymore. Any of the things that adversely affected them in this lifetime that helped them to create some of the situations that they got involved in that weren't exactly the best for them at that, during this lifetime.
Incredible. Well, thank you guys so much. Really appreciate your time this evening. I think I really enjoyed it. I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. Jerry, can you let people know where they can find you online?
Well, they can find me at jerrymarzinsky.com. And I just kind of want to add that, the psychiatric mafia is trying to tell people that they're the only treatment for mental illness. Now, there's a new psychotherapy called the MACE energy method that can absolutely cure most psychological problems. Okay. Lynn has experienced that. We work together with that. But find yourself a MACE practitioner.
Mhm.
They will get rid of this stuff in maybe an hour, 2 hours, stuff that's been plaguing you your entire life. They don't want you to know that there's any other way to treat mental illness other than their drugs.
That's very true. Jerry actually did it on me, and I have to say, what a relief. He pulled stuff out of me from even childhood, some traumatic events from childhood. And the thing about it is you don't forget the incident, but you are not affected. But it's kind of like standing at the window looking in and saying, oh, wow, isn't that terrible that happened to those poor people? But it's not affecting you directly. You're not emotional about it. You're just, not like you were when you were actually in the situation and you were flight and fright and you were scared and you couldn't breathe because you were having so much anxiety. None of that is there anymore. You reflect on it and it doesn't have any effect on you anymore. So I can vouch that it really works.
Is this information on your website, Jerry?
I don't think so. I don't think I put that on there.
Okay, well, I have the link to your website in the description of this video as well. And I also have Lynn, I have your website in the description. Can you tell people where they can find you, Lynn?
Yes, www.lynnmonet.com is my website. There's a way to reach me through email. If you want to reach out for any reason, I have books on Amazon. I'm kind of pulling them away from Amazon and trying to get them on my website more because, well, we won't go there. Amazon has enough money, but and they don't like yeah. Well, we won't go there.
I saw a video really quickly. I don't know if this is true or not, so no one quote me on this. It was some stupid TikTok, Instagram video, which you never know if any of that stuff is real at all. But there was a lady on there that was talking about that Amazon is now going to be offering healthcare services that you pay $99 annually, and it's like an insurance type of program, and then they'll connect you with a doctor online and prescribe you any of the kind of medication that you need after your visit virtually online. So we all see where that is going there, but I'm not 100% sure on it. Please don't quote me. Please don't say that if it's wrong, if it's right or whatever, because I really don't know. But I could see it actually being a thing. It would be something that they would do, right? They already have the handprint scanners. You go into Whole Foods now. Amazon does that you can pay with your palm.
Oh my God! I would say run like hell.
Yeah.
go find not the doc in the box, but go find the one that still has paper files. Then you're in the right place.
Yeah. Well, thanks guys so much. Really appreciate your time this evening. It was amazing, wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much for having us. Yeah, thank you.
The links to both of their websites are in the description of this video. Please be sure to hit the thumbs up button to help the channel and the algorithms. Thanks everyone in the chat. Nina the Mystic, Sherry, good to see you guys. Noble Truth, F Kitty, Shireen, thank you, Sam, Ronald, and everyone that's been chatting here the whole time. Thank you guys very much. Really appreciate all of you guys being interested in this topic. And I will see you guys on Tuesday. Thanks so much.
And don't
Bye-bye.
forget to subscribe.
That's right. Like, share, subscribe. All right. See you guys later.